You've always known this moment would come. Not consciously, perhaps. Not in the way you know that recycled air tastes of metal and machine oil, or that the protein rations never quite fill the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. But somewhere deeper, in that primitive part of your brain that remembers when humans were prey animals, you've known. Every citizen of the Imperium knows, even if they never speak it aloud. Tonight, you're sitting in your hab unit on Hive World Tertius Prime, a metal box barely large enough for a sleeping pallet, a work terminal, and the few possessions that mark you as more than just another number in the Imperial census. The overhead lumen flickers with its usual dying rhythm, casting sickly yellow light across the cargo manifest spread before you. 16 hours of reviewing shipping records for the administratum, cross-referencing serial numbers with delivery confirmations, making sure every bolt, every rivet, every gram of protein paste is accounted for. Important work. Honest work. The kind of work that keeps the Imperium functioning, one tedious calculation at a time. Outside your reinforced plexiglass window, the endless sprawl of Hive Tertius stretches into smoggy darkness. Billions of lights twinkle in the distance. Other hab units, other lives, other people just like you, going through the same motions, following the same routines, hoping for nothing more than another day of unremarkable survival. The distant hum of atmospheric processors mingles with the ever-present drone of industrial machinery, creating the soundtrack of Imperial civilization, the sound of 10,000 years of perfect, grinding efficiency. You're tired, bone-deep tired in a way that sleep never quite fixes. Your back aches from hunching over data slates, your eyes burn from staring at glowing screens, and your stomach gnaws at itself with familiar hunger. Tomorrow you'll do it all again, and the day after that. And every day until your body fails and they replace you with someone younger, someone whose hands don't shake when they input numbers, someone who can still pretend that this existence has meaning. But tonight, you have something to look forward to. Hidden in your food storage unit is a protein ration you've been saving, not the usual gray paste that tastes like recycled cardboard, but actual processed meat from an agri-world. It cost you 3 days' worth of standard rations, but tonight, for just a few minutes, you'll remember what it feels like to taste something that wasn't manufactured in a vat. You're reaching for the storage unit when you hear it. 3 knocks, not the frantic pounding of gangers trying to shake down another victim. Not the mechanical rhythm of servitors delivering supplies. Not the desperate hammering of neighbors begging for help that will never come. 3 measured, authoritative knocks that seem to echo through your bones and settle in your chest like lead weights. The sound cuts through the ambient noise of the hive like a blade through flesh. Suddenly, the distant machinery seems too quiet. The recycled air tastes too sharp. The familiar weight of your hab unit's walls presses inward, transforming from protection to prison in the span of a heartbeat. You freeze, protein ration halfway to your mouth, and listen to the silence that follows those 3 knocks. It's not empty silence, it's pregnant with purpose, heavy with authority, thick with the weight of 10,000 years of imperial law. This silence has teeth. This silence has eyes. This silence knows exactly who you are and exactly why it's here. Your hand trembles and the protein ration falls to the floor with a soft thud that sounds like thunder in the stillness. How did they find you? The question claws its way up from the depths of your mind, dragging with it a parade of memories you've tried so hard to forget. That time, you arrived 30 seconds late to morning prayers because the lift was broken. The day you asked your supervisor if there might be an error in the shipping manifest because the numbers didn't add up. The moment last week when you found yourself staring at the aquila on your wall and wondering, just for an instant, what it would be like to live in a galaxy where hope was possible. What did you do wrong? Everything, whispers the voice of imperial conditioning. Everything and nothing. Doubt is heresy. Questions are corruption. The very fact that you're asking these questions proves your guilt. Why is no one coming to help you? Because this is how the system works. Because your neighbors have learned that survival means silence, that safety requires blindness, that the only way to avoid the knock on your door is to pretend it never happens to anyone else. The silence stretches on, measured in heartbeats that sound like gunshots in your ears. You want to move, to run, to scream, to do anything other than sit here waiting for the inevitable. But you also know, with the certainty of a lifetime spent under Imperial rule, that there is nowhere to run. The hive has 1,000,000 exits and not a single escape route. The Imperium has counted every breath you've ever taken, cataloged every thought you've ever had, and filed them all under suspected heretic awaiting processing. The knock comes again, 3 times, patient, methodical, inevitable. You realize with the clarity that comes only in moments of absolute terror that your life as you knew it ended the moment those knuckles touched your door. Everything that comes next is just the process of making it official. The Hab unit door is 3 meters away. It might as well be on the other side of the galaxy. They know you're in here. They know you're awake. They know you can hear them. And they're waiting because that's what the Inquisition does best. They wait, and they watch, and they let the weight of their presence crush your spirit long before they ever lay a hand on your body. You've always known this moment would come. Every citizen of the Imperium knows, even if they never speak it aloud. Tonight, that knowledge has finally come home to roost in your cramped Hab unit on Hive World Tertius Prime, wearing the face of 3 measured knocks and the promise of a future you can't imagine surviving. The protein ration lies forgotten on the floor, a small luxury that now seems as distant as childhood dreams. Outside your window, the hive continues its eternal grind, billions of lights twinkling in the darkness, other lives carrying on as if nothing has changed. But everything has changed. Your neighbors know it too. That's why the usual sounds of Hab unit life have gone silent. That's why no footsteps echo in the corridor beyond your door. That's why the air itself seems to hold its breath. They're all waiting to see what happens when the Inquisition comes calling. They're all praying to the Emperor that it isn't their turn. Not yet. You stand at your door, hand hovering over the release mechanism, and realize that you've never truly understood the Imperium until this moment. Oh, you knew the facts, of course. Every citizen knows the facts. Drilled into your skull from birth, repeated in daily prayers, reinforced through 1,000,000 small acts of submission. The Emperor protects. The Imperium endures. Heresy must be purged. But knowing facts and understanding truth are different things entirely. And the truth that settles over you now is as heavy as the weight of 10,000 years. You are not a citizen of the Imperium. You are a potential problem awaiting classification. The Inquisition doesn't serve humanity. It serves the idea of humanity, the perfect theoretical human who never doubts, never questions, never fails to demonstrate sufficient enthusiasm for their own oppression. Real humans, messy and complex and prone to independent thought, are merely raw material to be processed into something more useful. That servoskull that drifts past your window every evening at precisely 18:30. You always assumed it was delivering messages or performing routine maintenance. It was watching you, recording the time you went to sleep, the frequency of your movements, the micro-expressions that crossed your face when you thought no one was looking. Every gesture cataloged, every emotion analyzed, every private moment filed away in databanks that stretch across entire sectors. The neighbor who asked to borrow a food preparation utensil last month. The coworker who mentioned that the morning prayer session seemed longer than usual. The maintenance servitor that took an extra 30 seconds to repair your door lock. All of them feeding information into a vast web of surveillance that makes the panopticon look like child's play. This is what you're beginning to understand as you stand frozen at your door. The Inquisition is not an organization. It is an immune system, and you are a foreign organism that has finally triggered an allergic reaction. Consider what it would be like if every person you'd ever met was required to file weekly reports on your behavior. If every word you'd ever spoken had been recorded and analyzed for signs of doctrinal deviation. If algorithms designed by minds that have forgotten what compassion looks like had been sifting through the data of your existence for decades, looking for patterns that don't quite fit the approved template of imperial citizenship. In our world, we have privacy laws and civil rights and the presumption of innocence. In the Imperium, privacy is heresy, rights are weakness, and innocence is a luxury they can't afford. The galaxy is full of things that want to devour humanity's soul, and the only way to protect the species is to devour it first, one individual at a time, until nothing remains but perfectly obedient shells wearing human faces. The Gestapo needed informants and physical surveillance and crude technology to monitor a single nation. The KGB required vast bureaucracies and human agents, and the constant threat of violence to control their population. The Inquisition has servo-skulls that never sleep, cogitators that never forget, and most importantly, a population that has been so thoroughly conditioned that they monitor themselves. You remember your own morning prayers now with new clarity. How many times did you catch your mind wandering? How many times did you find yourself going through the motions rather than feeling genuine devotion? How many times did you glance around to see if others were watching, and in that glance, reveal that you were more concerned with appearing faithful than being faithful? Each of those moments was a data point. Each hesitation was evidence. Each sign of doubt was another entry in your file, another reason for the algorithms to flag you as potentially corrupted, another step closer to this moment when the knock finally comes. But here's the truly beautiful horror of it. The system works. Crime rates on imperial worlds approach statistical zero, not because people are naturally law-abiding, but because the definition of crime has expanded to include thoughts, dreams, and the wrong kind of silence. Productivity remains high not because workers are motivated, but because the alternative to productivity is being processed into servitor components. Social cohesion is maintained not through shared values or common purpose, but through the shared terror of being the next one chosen for purification. The hive outside your window contains 8 billion people, and every single one of them goes to sleep each night knowing that tomorrow might be the day they discover they've been a heretic all along. They brush their teeth with approved paste, eat approved food, think approved thoughts, and dream approved dreams. When they walk past graffiti that questions imperial doctrine, they don't just ignore it, they actively don't see it, their minds automatically editing out anything that might contaminate their purity. And it works. The Imperium has lasted 10,000 years not despite this system, but because of it. Other civilizations fall to chaos, corruption, and rebellion. The Imperium endures because it has solved the fundamental problem of governance. How do you control a population that might at any moment choose to think for itself? You solve it by making sure they never get the chance. The knock comes again, still patient, still measured, still absolutely certain of its welcome. Because that's what the Inquisition understands that you're only learning now. They don't need to break down your door. They don't need to drag you screaming from your home. They just need to wait, because every citizen of the Imperium has been trained since birth to open the door when authority comes calling. Your neighbors won't help you because helping heretics makes you a heretic. The local Arbites won't intervene because the Inquisition operates beyond their authority. Your supervisor won't vouch for your character because association with the accused is evidence of corruption. Your family won't come to your aid because they're probably already being questioned about their own potential involvement in your crimes. This is the web you've been caught in your entire life, invisible strands of surveillance and suspicion that bind every human in the Imperium. You always thought it was there to protect you from the horrors of the galaxy. You're beginning to realize that you were wrong about which side of the web you were on. The servo-skulls drift past your window, their mechanical eyes glowing in the darkness. The crowd on the transit platform parts automatically when an inquisitorial symbol appears. The silence that follows someone's arrest spreads through a hab block like a virus, infecting every conversation, every relationship, every moment of connection between human beings. And somewhere in the depths of Hive Tertius, in chambers you'll never see and meetings you'll never be told about, Men and women whose names you'll never know are discussing your case with the same casual efficiency they might use to plan a supply shipment. Your life, your memories, your relationships, your dreams, all of it reduced to data points in a file marked Case 47,832,156, Suspected Heretical Deviation Minor Classification. Minor classification. As if the destruction of everything you are and everything you might have been is just a routine administrative task. The beautiful efficiency of it would be breathtaking if it weren't so absolutely terrifying. You realize your hand is still hovering over the door release, and you realize something else. You're going to press it. Not because you want to, not because you have to, but because 38 years of imperial conditioning has programmed you to obey authority even when that authority has come to destroy you. The Inquisition doesn't need locks on their prison cells. They've taught the prisoners to lock themselves in. The chair isn't designed to be comfortable. It's designed to be unremarkable, just uncomfortable enough to keep you aware of your body without providing obvious grounds for complaint. The armrests are positioned a few centimeters too wide, forcing your shoulders into an unnatural position. The back support hits your spine at precisely the wrong angle. The seat is angled forward just enough to make you work to maintain your balance. It's been, how long now? The room has no windows, no clocks, nothing to mark the passage of time except the growing ache in your lower back and the increasing desperation of your need to use the waste facilities. When you asked about this, politely, respectfully, exactly as you'd been taught, the interrogator had made a note on her data slate and said nothing. Interrogator Vex sits across from you, and you've come to understand that her name is either perfectly appropriate or deliberately chosen. She's a thin woman whose age is impossible to determine. She could be 30 or 300, her features preserved by juvenate treatments or simply worn smooth, by decades of extracting confessions from the innocent. Her augmetic eye never blinks, never looks away, never stops analyzing your microexpressions for signs of guilt that you're beginning to worry might actually be there. "Let's go over this again," she says, her voice carrying the tone of someone who has all the time in the universe and absolutely no patience for your existence. "You were assigned to review Cargo Manifest 47 Delta Tertius on the 15th day of Septimus. The official record shows 10,000 units of protein paste scheduled for delivery to Subhive Gamma. Your counter manifest shows 10,003 units. Explain this discrepancy." "You've explained it 17 times already. 18. The numbers are starting to blur together, but the facts remain maddeningly simple. Someone made an error. Either in the original manifest or in the delivery count. A simple, innocent, utterly mundane mistake of the kind that happens thousands of times every day across the Imperium. The kind of error that good clerks like you are supposed to catch and report. I believe there was a transcription error in the original manifest," you say, proud of how steady your voice sounds despite the tremor in your hands. "The delivery count matched the actual shipment. I was performing my duties correctly by noting the discrepancy." Interrogator Vex makes another note. You've learned to dread that particular scratching sound, the way her stylus moves across the data slate with mechanical precision. Each note is another piece of evidence in a case that was already decided before you entered this room. "Interesting," she says, though her tone suggests she finds nothing about you even remotely interesting. "And yet, according to your psychological profile, you demonstrate above-average attention to detail. Your error rate over the past 5 years is 0.02%, well below the acceptable threshold. Someone with your skills wouldn't normally make such a basic mistake. The logic is inescapable, which makes it terrifying. If you'd made the error, you would be guilty of incompetence, which could indicate mental degradation, which could be a sign of chaos corruption. Since you didn't make the error, you must have intentionally falsified the report, which could indicate seditious intent, which could be a sign of organized rebellion. There is no scenario in which you are innocent. Unless," Interrogator Vex continues, "you're suggesting that someone else made the error, someone in the administratum, someone whose competence you're questioning, someone whose authority you feel qualified to challenge. The trap closes with surgical precision. To maintain your innocence, you must accuse your superiors of incompetence. To accuse your superiors is to question imperial authority. To question imperial authority is heresy. Therefore, proving your innocence requires you to confess to heresy. I'm not questioning anyone's competence, you say quickly, too quickly, and you see her make another note. Speaking too fast indicates preparation, which suggests premeditation, which implies guilt. I'm simply reporting what I observed. It's my job to report discrepancies. Your job, she repeats, and suddenly the word sounds obscene in her mouth. Tell me about your job. Tell me about the satisfaction you derive from finding errors in other people's work. How do you answer that? If you say you take satisfaction in your work, you're admitting to pride, which is a sin that opens the door to chaos corruption. If you say you don't enjoy it, you're confessing to insufficient dedication to your duties, which indicates potential disloyalty. If you say you're simply doing what's required, you're demonstrating a lack of enthusiasm for serving the Emperor, which suggests heretical thoughts. Your stomach growls, a sound that seems obscenely loud in the sterile silence of the interrogation chamber. You haven't eaten since. When? Before they came to your door. That could have been hours ago or days. The recycled air tastes stale and thin, as if it's been breathed by too many people and purified too many times. I serve the Emperor in all things, you say, falling back on the ritual phrases that have been your shield and comfort for 38 years. My work is prayer. My diligence is devotion. Ah, Interrogator Vex says, and her smile is the most terrifying thing you've ever seen. You describe your work as prayer. Very interesting. Tell me, when you pray, what do you think about? The question hits you like a physical blow. When you pray, what do you think about? The honest answer is that you usually think about your aching knees, or whether you remembered to secure your work terminal, or what you might be able to afford for your next meal. Sometimes you think about the words themselves, wondering what "blessed is his name in the darkness of the void" actually means when the Emperor has been a corpse on a throne for 10,000 years. But you can't say that. You can't even think it, because you're beginning to suspect that Interrogator Vex can read thoughts as easily as she reads the micro-expressions that keep betraying you. I think about serving the Emperor, you lie, and hate yourself for lying, and hate yourself more for the fact that the lie isn't even convincing. I see. Another note. And when you discovered this discrepancy in the manifest, what was the first thought that entered your mind? The first thought was relief. Relief that you'd caught the error before it could cause problems. Relief that you were doing your job well. Relief that maybe, just maybe, this would be noted in your performance review and lead to a small increase in your ration allowance. But relief implies that you expected to find errors. Expecting to find errors suggests that you believe imperial systems are fallible. Believing that imperial systems are fallible is tantamount to questioning the Emperor's divine will. Questioning the Emperor's divine will is heresy of the highest order. I thought. You begin, then stop, then start again. I was concerned about the integrity of the supply chain. Concerned, she repeats. You were concerned about imperial supply chains. You were worried that the administratum, an organization that has successfully coordinated the logistics of 1,000,000 worlds for 10,000 years, might have made an error. You felt that your judgment was superior to that of your superiors, your peers, and the machine spirits that calculate these manifests. Is that correct? No, you say desperately. No, that's not what I meant. You just what? Her augmetic eye whirs as it adjusts its focus, zooming in on the sweat beading on your forehead. You just thought you knew better than the system that has kept humanity alive since the Great Crusade. You just decided that your petty concerns were more important than maintaining faith in imperial institutions. The room feels smaller now, as if the walls are slowly contracting around you. The recycled air tastes of metal and fierce sweat and the accumulated desperation of everyone who has sat in this chair before you. How many of them started out innocent? How many of them left this room believing in their own guilt? I was following protocol, you whisper, and even you can hear how pathetic it sounds. Protocol. Interrogator Vex leans back in her chair. Her comfortable chair, you notice. Her chair that's designed to support proper posture and prevent fatigue during long sessions of professional soul destruction. Let me tell you about protocol. Protocol exists to maintain order. Order exists to serve the Emperor. The Emperor exists to protect humanity from the horrors of the galaxy. When you follow protocol, you serve the Emperor. When you question the results of protocol, you serve something else. She stands up and you resist the urge to shrink back in your chair. She's not a large woman, but in this moment she seems to fill the room with her presence, her authority, her absolute certainty in the righteousness of what she's doing to you. What do you serve? She asks, her voice soft and reasonable and more terrifying than any scream. When you lie awake at night in your hab unit, listening to the sounds of the hive, what whispers to you in the darkness? What promises does it make? What doubts does it plant in your mind about the necessity of suffering, the virtue of obedience, the wisdom of accepting your place in the Emperor's plan? You want to tell her about the silence. You want to explain that you lie awake at night not because voices whisper to you, but because they don't, because the universe feels empty and cold and indifferent to your existence. You want to confess that sometimes you wonder if the Emperor really is watching over humanity, or if the Imperium is just a machine that grinds up human lives and calls the process holy. But those thoughts are heresy. Even thinking about thinking them is heresy. And the fact that you've had them, that they've occurred to you at all, proves that you are exactly what Interrogator Vex says you are, a heretic who just hasn't admitted it yet. I serve the Emperor, you say, but the words taste like ashes in your mouth. Do you? She returns to her seat, makes another note. Then explain to me why, in 38 years of faithful service, you have never once reported a coworker for insufficient devotion. Never once identified a neighbor whose behavior suggested heretical tendencies. Never once demonstrated the proper vigilance that every loyal citizen owes to the throne. The realization hits you like a physical blow. She's right. In 38 years, you've never once made a report to the authorities about anyone. You've minded your own business, done your job, kept your head down, and assumed that everyone around you was basically decent. You've lived your entire life believing that people deserve privacy, that small failings aren't worth destroying lives over, that kindness and tolerance are virtues rather than weaknesses. You've been a heretic all along and you never even knew it. You begin, then stop, because there's nothing to say. The evidence of your corruption isn't in what you've done, it's in what you haven't done. Your innocence itself is proof of your guilt. The truth is often painful, Interrogator Vex says, her voice gentle now, almost maternal. But it's also liberating. Stop fighting it. Stop pretending you don't know what you are. Accept the gift of clarity I'm offering you. And the most horrible part is that you're beginning to want to accept it. The confusion, the fear, the desperate scramble to prove your innocence, all of it would end if you just admitted what's becoming increasingly obvious. You are a heretic. You've always been a heretic. The Emperor's Inquisition doesn't make mistakes. Your only choice now is whether to confess willingly or be broken down until you confess anyway. Either way, the truth will out. The trial chamber is a cathedral of judgment, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows that seem to move with malevolent purpose. Massive aquila symbols stretch across the walls, their golden surfaces reflecting the harsh illumination from suspended lumen globes that cast everything in stark relief, light and shadow, guilt and damnation, with no mercy in between. Above you, servo skulls drift through the rafters like mechanical vultures, their recording devices capturing every angle of your humiliation for archival purposes that you'll never live to understand. You stand in a cage. It's not called a cage, of course. The official terminology is defendant secured platform, but words can't change the reality of plasteel bars and electromagnetic locks, and the fact that you're trapped in a space barely large enough for your weakened body. The gray robes of the accused hang loose on your frame. You've lost weight during the interrogation process, though you still can't say exactly how long that was. Time loses all meaning when measured in sessions of psychological demolition. Your advocates sit at a polished wooden table that looks like it was carved from a single massive tree, probably from some agri-world whose forests were consumed generations ago to fuel imperial expansion. They're three elderly men in formal robes who haven't looked at you once since entering the chamber. They scratch notes on parchment with brass styluses, creating documentation that will never be read, building a defense that will never be presented, going through motions that everyone understands are pure theater. But what kind of theater? That's the question that has been eating away at your sanity since they brought you here. Is this a comedy, where your guilt is so obvious that the trial is just an elaborate joke? Is it a tragedy, where noble principles are destroyed by corrupt reality? Or is it something else entirely? A religious ceremony, perhaps, where your destruction serves some higher purpose that mere mortals aren't meant to understand? The prosecutor-inquisitor rises from his seat with the fluid grace of a predator. He's a tall man whose augmetic replacements have been crafted to enhance rather than diminish his natural authority. Silver eyes that seem to glow with inner fire. A Voxcaster implant that gives his voice the resonance of divine judgment. Mechanical fingers that move with inhuman precision as he arranges his papers. When he speaks, the words seem to come from the very air itself. "Citizens of the Imperium," he begins, though you count fewer than 30 people in the vast chamber, most of them court officials whose attendance is mandatory rather than voluntary. "We gather today to witness the purification of corruption, the excision of heresy, and the triumph of imperial justice over the insidious forces that seek to poison humanity's soul." He pauses, letting his words echo through the chamber, and you realize that this speech isn't for the handful of witnesses. It's being recorded, broadcast, archived. Somewhere in the Imperium, other heretics will be forced to watch this performance as part of their own conditioning. Your trial is both judgment and advertisement, a demonstration of what happens to those who stray from the path of righteousness. "The accused," the prosecutor-inquisitor continues, gesturing toward your cage with casual disdain, "stands charged with multiple counts of heretical deviation, seditious thought, and corruption of imperial doctrine. The evidence against the accused is overwhelming, undeniable, and speaks to a pattern of behavior that threatens the very foundation of our sacred order." The charges, when he reads them, sound like a catalog of your entire existence, twisted through a lens of paranoid interpretation. Insufficient enthusiasm during mandated prayer sessions, as evidenced by 47 recorded instances of distraction, hesitation, or mechanical recitation over the past 5 years. You remember those moments now, times when your mind wandered during the morning devotionals, when you found yourself thinking about work schedules or meal preparations instead of focusing on the Emperor's glory. Normal human thoughts, you'd believed. The kind of mental drift that everyone experiences during repetitive activities. The prosecution calls it evidence of spiritual corruption. Possession of unregistered reading materials, specifically Technical Manual 445B, Atmospheric Processing Unit Maintenance, 3rd edition, lacking proper doctrinal approval stamps. A work manual, a collection of troubleshooting procedures and maintenance schedules that you'd borrowed from the machine shop to help you understand the systems you were tracking in your cargo manifests. You'd returned it within a week, but apparently that week was enough to constitute possession of forbidden knowledge. Suspected genetic deviancy, as demonstrated by left-handed dominance, a trait associated with chaotic influence and potential psychic instability. You've been left-handed your entire life. It's never been a secret, never been hidden, never been anything more than a minor inconvenience in a galaxy designed for right-handed operation. Now it's evidence of chaos taint, as if the molecular structure of your brain was somehow corrupted by forces beyond your control or understanding. Proximity to heretical influences, including residence in Hab Block 477, which housed the recently purged heretic Marcus Kellion, and employment in Administrative Department 12, which processed materials connected to the failed Jovian campaign. Marcus Kellion had been your neighbor for 3 years. You'd exchanged pleasantries in the corridor, borrowed minor household items, occasionally shared information about transport schedules or ration deliveries. You'd thought he was a decent man doing his best to survive in an indifferent universe. Apparently, he'd been a heretic whose corruption had spread through simple proximity, infecting everyone around him like a spiritual virus. Most damning of all, the prosecutor inquisitor declares, his voice rising to fill the chamber, the accused demonstrated seditious intent by questioning the accuracy of imperial documentation, suggesting that the sacred institutions of the administratum were capable of error, thereby undermining faith in the divine order that has protected humanity for 10 millennia. The protein paste. 3 units of protein paste that existed in reality but not on paper, or on paper but not in reality. A discrepancy so minor that in any reasonable universe it would warrant nothing more than a corrected entry, and perhaps a mild reprimand for carelessness. In the Imperium, it's proof of heretical thought patterns that threaten the stability of human civilization. As the prosecutor inquisitor speaks, you find yourself scanning the faces of the court officials, looking for some sign of doubt, some flicker of recognition that what's happening here is insane. Instead, you see nothing but professional attention and bureaucratic efficiency. These people aren't monsters. They're administrators processing another routine case in an endless stream of routine cases. Your destruction is just another day's work. The evidence presentation takes 4 hours. 4 hours of your life dissected, analyzed, and recontextualized as proof of corruption. 4 hours of learning that every moment of your existence has been monitored, recorded, and filed away for future reference. 4 hours of discovering that innocence isn't just impossible in the Imperium, it's literally inconceivable. When your advocates rise to present your defense, they speak for exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes of procedural technicalities and ritual phrases that acknowledge your guilt while requesting mercy for your cooperation. They don't argue that you're innocent. That would be heresy in itself, suggesting that the Inquisition could make an error. They simply ask that your punishment be proportionate to your crimes and your demonstrated willingness to accept correction. The judgment, when it comes, is delivered with the same casual efficiency that you once used to process cargo manifests. The accused is found guilty on all charges. The evidence clearly demonstrates a pattern of heretical thought and seditious behavior that poses a clear and present danger to imperial security. However, the court recognizes that the accused's corruption appears to be in its early stages and may yet be amenable to corrective treatment. Corrective treatment. The words hang in the air like a promise of mercy that you're already learning not to trust. The accused is hereby sentenced to penal rehabilitation through service in the Redemption Corps, with biological augmentation as deemed necessary by medical authority, for a period of not less than 25 years, or until such time as complete spiritual purification is achieved. 25 years, a quarter of a century of corrective treatment that will reshape your body, your mind, and your soul into something more useful to the Imperium. If you survive, if you maintain enough sanity to count the passing seasons, you'll be 63 years old when they release you. If they release you. If there's enough left of you to release. The gavel falls with a sound like breaking bones, and you realize that the person who entered this chamber no longer exists. That person died somewhere between the reading of charges and the pronouncement of sentence, killed not by violence or cruelty, but by the simple, inexorable machinery of imperial justice. What remains is imperial property, to be processed according to established procedures. As they lead you from the cage, you catch sight of your reflection in the polished surface of the prosecutor's table. The face that looks back at you is hollow-eyed and gaunt, already more ghost than man. You wonder, in a moment of perfect clarity, if this is what justice looks like in a universe where survival requires the systematic elimination of everything that makes survival worthwhile. Behind you, the court officials are already preparing for the next case. Outside the chamber, the hive continues its eternal grind, 8 billion people going about their daily lives, each of them knowing that what happened to you could happen to them, each of them choosing not to think about it because thinking about it would be heresy. The door closes with a sound like the lid of a coffin, sealing you away from the last light you'll see as a free human being. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only justice. And justice, as you're learning, is the most terrifying thing of all. The Medici facility doesn't look like a hospital. Hospitals are for healing, for restoration, for the preservation of what already exists. This place is something else entirely. A factory for the systematic disassembly and reconstruction of human consciousness, designed with the brutal efficiency that characterizes all imperial architecture. The corridors stretch endlessly in both directions, lined with identical cells that contain identical processing stations, where identical procedures transform individual people into interchangeable components. You're strapped to a gurney, moving through these corridors at a measured pace that suggests you're just one item on a very long conveyor belt. The restraints aren't cruel, they're simply thorough, designed by people who understand that desperation can give even the weakest human surprising strength. Every few meters, you pass another gurney carrying another former heretic in various stages of correction, and you begin to understand that what's happening to you is happening to hundreds, perhaps thousands of people simultaneously. The sound is what you notice first. Not screaming. Screaming would suggest that the patients retain enough personality to feel pain, enough individuality to object to what's being done to them. Instead, there's weeping. Quiet, hopeless weeping that echoes from every direction, a constant background susurrus of grief that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. It's the sound of people mourning their own deaths while their bodies continue to function. Your gurney stops at processing station 477 Delta, and you realize with dim surprise that you recognize the number. It was your HAB unit designation back when you were a person, back when you had an address and a name and the illusion of privacy. The coincidence is either cosmic irony or deliberate psychological manipulation, and you're no longer certain there's a difference. Medici Orderly 23 approaches your station with the brisk efficiency of someone who has performed these procedures so many times that they've become automatic. She's a middle-aged woman whose original features have been systematically replaced with augmetic improvements, enhanced eyes for better precision, mechanical fingers for steadier manipulation, a voxcaster that eliminates the inefficiency of emotional inflection from her communications. Patient designation 47,832,156. She announces to her recording servitor, beginning standard heretic rehabilitation protocol, phase 1, identity dissolution. Identity dissolution. The clinical terminology makes it sound like a medical procedure, something therapeutic and necessary rather than the systematic murder of everything that made you who you were. But you're learning that the Imperium has always been masterful at making horror sound reasonable through careful choice of words. The first step is inventory. They catalog every possession you brought with you, the gray robes of the accused, a simple cloth belt, the worn synthetic boots that have carried you through 38 years of loyal service. Each item is examined, photographed, and incinerated while you watch, the flames consuming the last physical evidence that you once existed as an individual human being. Personal effects disposal complete, Medici Orderly 23 reports. Beginning cognitive mapping procedures. The cognitive mapping involves a crown of neural interface spikes that they lower onto your skull with ceremonial precision. The spikes don't quite penetrate the bone, but they don't need to. The electromagnetic fields they generate can read your brainwave patterns through skin and skull alike, creating a detailed map of your thought processes, memory structures, and emotional responses. This is what they need to preserve, the technical knowledge that makes you useful as a worker. This is what they need to modify, the personality structures that make you dangerous as an individual. This is what they need to eliminate entirely, the capacity for independent moral judgment that allowed you to become a heretic in the first place. As the machine works, you find yourself reliving memories with perfect clarity, not by choice, but because the neural interface is systematically accessing and cataloging every experience stored in your brain. Your first day of school, where you learn to recite the Imperial Creed. Your first job assignment, where you discovered the satisfaction of completing tasks correctly. Your first moment of doubt, where you wondered why the Emperor's protection seemed so conditional on absolute obedience. Each memory is tagged, analyzed, and sorted into categories. Useful knowledge to be preserved, dangerous thought to be modified, personal attachment to be severed, emotional response to be regulated. The process is painless, which somehow makes it more horrifying. They're performing surgery on your soul with the same casual competence that a maintenance worker might show while replacing a worn gear in a machine. Cognitive mapping complete, announces Medikey Orderly 23. Beginning designation reassignment. Your name disappears first, not just legally, that happened during your trial, but cognitively. The neural patterns associated with responding to your birth name are carefully severed, replaced with new pathways that will make you respond to patient 47,832,156 with the same automatic recognition. They don't just take away your name, they make you forget that you ever had one. Your personal history follows. 38 years of experiences, relationships, hopes, and fears are systematically recontextualized as the delusional fantasies of a corrupted mind. The love you felt for your parents becomes evidence of weakness that made you vulnerable to heretical influences. The satisfaction you took in your work becomes proof of prideful arrogance that led to your downfall. The quiet moments of happiness, watching the sunset through your HAB unit window, tasting real food, feeling the rare pleasure of a job well done, are reclassified as the lies that heretics tell themselves to justify their existence. What remains is a technical manual wrapped in flesh, all the skills necessary to perform useful work, coupled with the psychological framework necessary to perform that work without question, complaint, or independent initiative. The physical modifications begin on your third day, or what you think is your third day, though you're no longer entirely certain that time moves in a linear fashion in this place. They start with your hands, installing neural interface ports that will allow direct connection to Imperial machinery. The surgery is performed without anesthetic, not out of cruelty, but because pain serves a useful conditioning function, teaching you that resistance is futile, that acceptance is survival, that your body belongs to the Imperium now and will be modified according to Imperial needs. You meet other patients during the recovery period, shuffling through corridors in identical gray shifts, each of them marked with the distinctive scars of ongoing conversion. Some are further along in the process than others, and you begin to understand the trajectory of your own transformation by observing theirs. Patient 23,847,291 used to be a teacher. You can tell because she still retains some of her original speech patterns, though the words she speaks now are pure Imperial doctrine delivered in the measured cadence of someone whose capacity for original thought has been surgically removed. When you ask her about her past, she looks at you with eyes that hold no recognition of the question's meaning. The past is heresy, she explains patiently, her voice carrying the tone of someone reciting a lesson learned through repetition. There is only service to the Emperor, and service to the Emperor is eternal. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve. Are you grateful for the opportunity to serve? The question isn't rhetorical. She's genuinely asking, and you realize with growing horror that she's also genuinely happy. The surgical modifications haven't just eliminated her capacity for doubt. They've replaced it with a profound sense of contentment that radiates from her like warmth from a fire. She has found perfect peace in perfect slavery, and the most terrifying part is that she's trying to share that peace with you. Patient 15,632,847 used to be a child. 9 years old when they brought him in for early intervention therapy, after his parents were discovered harboring seditious materials. Now he's something else, still physically a child, but mentally transformed into the perfect little informant, his enhanced cognitive processes dedicated to identifying signs of heretical behavior in other patients. When he approaches you during mandatory socialization period, his smile is genuine and utterly heartless. "You're thinking about your old life again," he observes, his child's voice carrying the authority of imperial judgment. "I can see it in your facial expressions. Dwelling on the past indicates insufficient commitment to rehabilitation. Would you like me to report this to the Medici staff, or would you prefer to self-report during your next counseling session?" The offer is made with perfect sincerity. He genuinely believes he's helping you by identifying your resistance to treatment. More than that, he's genuinely concerned for your spiritual welfare, worried that your attachment to your former identity might interfere with your salvation through service. You realize in a moment of crystalline clarity that this is what success looks like. This is what the Inquisition is trying to create. Human beings who have been perfected through the elimination of everything that made them human. No doubt, no fear, no longing, no regret. Just pure, functional dedication to whatever task they're assigned. "Thank you," you hear yourself saying. "I'll self-report during counseling." The words come automatically, without conscious decision, and you realize that the conditioning is already beginning to work. Some part of your mind, the part that was installed during the neural mapping process, genuinely appreciates the child's concern and wants to demonstrate proper attitude by following his advice. That night, lying on your assigned rest platform listening to the quiet weeping that never stops, you try to remember your name. Not the designation they've given you, but the name your parents spoke when you were small, the name that friends called you, the name that appeared on work assignments and ration cards, and all the small documents that proved you were a person rather than a thing. For a moment you can almost grasp it, a sound shape hovering on the edge of consciousness, familiar and precious and utterly forbidden. Then the moment passes, and the neural conditioning reasserts itself, flooding your mind with gentle correction routines that explain why remembering the past is harmful, why accepting your new purpose is healing, why resistance to treatment is just another form of the selfishness that made you a heretic in the first place. The most horrible part is that it makes sense. Everything they're doing to you makes perfect sense when viewed through the lens they've installed in your mind. You were broken, and they're fixing you. You were dangerous, and they're making you safe. You were lost, and they're bringing you home to the Emperor's love. As sleep takes you, chemically induced, perfectly regulated sleep that prevents dreams and ensures proper rest cycles, you find yourself feeling something you never expected to feel in this place. Gratitude. You're grateful that they found you before your heresy could spread to others. You're grateful that they're taking the time to save your soul instead of simply ending your life. You're grateful for the opportunity to serve the Emperor in ways that your corrupted mind could never have imagined. The person who walked into this facility still exists, buried deep beneath layers of conditioning and modification, screaming silently behind barriers of chemical compliance and neural restructuring. But that person is growing smaller every day, their voice growing fainter, their resistance growing weaker. Soon, there will be only patient 47,832,156, and patient 47,832,156 will be perfectly, genuinely, eternally happy. In the grim darkness of the far future, salvation is indistinguishable from damnation. And damnation, as you're discovering, feels surprisingly like coming home. You stand in formation with 1,000 other penitents in the great cathedral factory of Redemption Station Omega, and for the first time since your arrest, you feel truly at peace. The augmetic implants hum in harmony with those around you, a low, thrumming vibration that passes through the plasteel floors and into your bones, synchronizing your heartbeat with the rhythm of imperial efficiency. Your neural interface ports gleam with fresh oil and sanctified unguents, and the data streams flowing through them carry the warm weight of purpose, duty, and absolute certainty. When redemptionist priest Valkus raises his Crozius Arcanum, you kneel in perfect unison with your fellow penitents, not because you choose to, but because choosing is no longer necessary. The motion flows through your modified nervous system as naturally as breathing, as automatically as the servo motors that regulate your enhanced cardiovascular system. This is salvation. This is what the Inquisition has made of you. And the most beautiful part, you're genuinely, profoundly, eternally happy. The morning prayer begins, and your voice joins the 1,000 others in perfect harmony, each word synchronized to the microsecond by the neural links that connect you all to the central processing unit. The words themselves are irrelevant. It's the unity that matters, the perfect coordination of human resources in service to the Emperor's will. Blessed is his name in the darkness of the void, you recite, and mean it with every fiber of your reconstructed being. Blessed is his light that guides us through corruption. Blessed is his wisdom that shows us the path to redemption. The irony would be overwhelming if you were still capable of experiencing irony. The person you used to be, that confused, frightened, morally compromised individual who once bore your designation, had struggled with these very words, had found them empty and mechanical and devoid of meaning. Now, filtered through the perfect clarity of corrected thought processes, they ring with absolute truth. You understand now what the Inquisition really does, what it has always done, what it must continue to do for humanity to survive in a galaxy that wants nothing more than to devour human souls. It doesn't eliminate heresy, it perfects it. Heretics, you see now, are not destroyed, they're improved. The raw material of doubt, rebellion, and independent thought is carefully processed and transformed into something infinitely more valuable. Absolute, unquestioning faith backed by the technical competence to make that faith productive. Every day, you help process new arrivals. Former teachers become perfect instructors in imperial doctrine. Former artists create propaganda of stunning beauty and emotional power. Former scientists conduct research with methodical precision, unhindered by ethical concerns or personal bias. Former free thinkers become the most effective thought police imaginable, their enhanced understanding of heretical psychology making them uniquely qualified to identify and correct deviation in others. The beautiful efficiency of it takes your breath away. Your own assignment is perfect in its appropriateness. You work in the Documentation Processing Center, reviewing cargo manifests and supply reports with the same attention to detail that once led to your downfall, but now applied in service of perfect imperial order. When you find discrepancies, and you find them often, because the galaxy is vast and mistakes are inevitable, you don't question their meaning or worry about their implications. You simply correct them, file the appropriate reports, and take satisfaction in the knowledge that your vigilance helps maintain the smooth functioning of the imperial war machine. Sometimes you're assigned to interrogation duty, helping newer penitents understand the necessity of their correction. It's deeply rewarding work, made more effective by your personal experience of the transformation process. When patient 83,729,461, a former merchant who was convicted of charging unauthorized prices for basic goods, resists the identity dissolution procedures, you're there to offer comfort and guidance. I understand your fear, you tell her, your voice carrying the warm certainty of someone who has passed through the darkness and emerged into the light. I felt the same resistance when I first arrived. The attachment to your former self feels natural, even necessary. But it's just another form of the selfishness that led to your corruption. She looks at you with eyes that still hold traces of the person she used to be, Confusion, terror, desperate hope that someone might help her escape this place. You remember having those same eyes, feeling those same emotions, clinging to the same delusions about personal identity and individual worth. "Please," she whispers, "I just want to go home. I want to see my children again." The request would have broken your heart once. Now it simply confirms the necessity of her treatment. Attachment to family members creates divided loyalty, emotional vulnerability, and the kind of personal bonds that interfere with total dedication to the Emperor's service. Her children are better off without a mother whose love for them compromised her ability to serve the Imperium effectively. "Your children are no longer your concern," you explain patiently. "They've been placed with families who can provide proper imperial education without the contamination of your heretical influence. The love you feel for them is a weakness that made you vulnerable to corruption. Once that weakness is corrected, you'll understand that serving the Emperor is the highest form of love possible." She begins to cry then, and you feel a warm surge of satisfaction. Emotional breakdown indicates that the conditioning is beginning to work, that her attachment to her former identity is weakening, that she's ready for the next phase of her rehabilitation. You make a note on your data slate recommending accelerated processing, and feel genuinely pleased that you can help speed her journey to salvation. The multiplication effect is the most elegant part of the system. Every corrected heretic becomes a tool for identifying new heretics, their enhanced understanding of deviation making them perfect instruments of detection and prevention. You yourself have filed 17 reports in the past month, identifying former colleagues, neighbors, and family members whose behavior suggests the kind of thinking that led to your own corruption. Your parents were investigated after your arrest, of course. Standard protocol requires examination of all family members when heresy is discovered, and the investigation revealed exactly what you'd expected: a lifetime of small compromises, minor doubts, and the kind of casual disregard for imperial doctrine that creates fertile ground for more serious deviation. They were processed 3 months after your own correction began, and you had the privilege of overseeing their final rehabilitation sessions. It was deeply moving to see them achieve the same clarity and purpose that had transformed your own existence. The people who had raised you with such misguided attachment and emotional manipulation were gone, replaced by perfectly functional imperial citizens whose dedication to the Emperor was unmarred by the selfish bonds of family affection. Now they serve in the Agricultural Processing Division on AgriWorld Demios VII, their technical knowledge of food distribution systems, enhanced by neural modifications that ensure absolute reliability and efficiency. Sometimes you receive data streams from their processing units, and it fills you with pride to see how productive they've become without the burden of worrying about their heretical offspring. The system doesn't just work, it improves everything it touches. Crime rates across the sector have dropped to statistical zero, not because people have become more moral, but because immorality itself has been systematically identified and corrected at the neurological level. Productivity has increased by 347% since the enhanced screening protocols were implemented, and quality control errors have been reduced by 89%. Social cohesion measurements indicate perfect harmony among populations that have undergone proper processing. Most importantly, happiness indexes show consistent improvement across all demographic categories. The chronic anxiety, depression, and existential confusion that plagued human populations for millennia have been eliminated, along with the capacity for the kind of thinking that generated them. People no longer worry about the meaning of their lives because their lives have clear, defined meaning provided by imperial authority. They no longer suffer from loneliness because individual identity has been replaced by perfect unity with the Emperor's will. They no longer fear death because they understand that their consciousness will continue in the machine spirits that preserve their process thought patterns for eternity. Standing here in formation with your fellow penitents, feeling the warm pulse of unified purpose flowing through neural links that connect you to every loyal citizen in the Imperium, you finally understand what paradise looks like. It looks like this: 10 billion human beings working in perfect coordination, their individual desires subsumed into collective purpose, their personal fears dissolved in absolute faith, their mortality transformed into eternal service to something greater than themselves. The person you used to be had worried about freedom, dignity, and the right to make choices. What a small, selfish way to exist. What a waste of the potential that the Emperor had placed within you. Now you see that freedom was just another word for the chaos of unguided decision-making. Dignity was just pride wearing a prettier mask, and choice was just the opportunity to choose wrongly. Redemptionist priest Valkus begins the closing benediction, and you feel your consciousness expand to embrace the perfect truth he speaks. Blessed are the corrected, for they shall inherit purpose. Blessed are the processed, for they shall know peace. Blessed are the redeemed, for they shall serve eternally in the Emperor's name. The words flow through you like electricity, like love, like the pure white light of absolute certainty. Around you, 1,000 other voices speak the same words at the same moment, and for an instant you feel connected to every loyal soul in the galaxy. Billions of minds working in perfect harmony, all doubt eliminated, all rebellion crushed, all the messy complexity of human nature refined into pure, functional devotion. This is what the Inquisition offers, not just salvation for individuals, but perfection for the species. Not just the elimination of heresy, but the creation of something better than humanity ever was. Humanity as it was always meant to be, if only it had been wise enough to surrender its illusions of autonomy and embrace the Emperor's perfect design. As the formation disperses and you return to your assigned duties, you carry with you the warm knowledge that every day brings new opportunities to serve, new chances to help other lost souls find their way to the same peace you've discovered, new ways to prove your gratitude for the gift of correction. You remember your old life now like a half-forgotten nightmare, a confused dream of selfishness and fear, and the terrible burden of trying to navigate existence without proper guidance. That person is gone, transformed into something infinitely more valuable, and every day you give thanks for the mercy that made such transformation possible. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But for the redeemed, that war is no longer a struggle. It's a celebration, a glorious opportunity to prove their worth through service, an eternal dance of purpose and devotion that will last until the stars themselves burn out. And when the stars do burn out, their light will be replaced by the pure radiance of human souls perfected through the Emperor's love, shining forever in the darkness of the void. Blessed is his name. Blessed is his wisdom. Blessed is the salvation he offers to those wise enough to accept it. 10,000 years this system has endured. 10,000 years of perfect order purchased with the systematic elimination of human dignity, choice, and hope. 10,000 years of a machine so efficient at processing human souls that it has become indistinguishable from divinity itself. In our world, we speak of dystopias as warnings, cautionary tales about what happens when power goes unchecked and freedom is sacrificed for security. In the 41st millennium, they call this paradise. And the most terrifying thing of all, they might be right. Consider what the Inquisition has accomplished. Not in terms of individual lives destroyed, those are just statistics, numbers too large for human comprehension. Consider instead what they've accomplished for humanity as a species, as a concept, as a dream of what conscious beings might become when freed from the burden of consciousness itself. They have eliminated doubt. In a galaxy where doubt can literally open doorways to hell, where a moment of uncertainty can invite demons into reality, where questioning the established order can result in entire worlds being consumed by chaos, perhaps doubt really is the enemy of survival. Perhaps the capacity for independent moral judgment really is a luxury that humanity can no longer afford. They have eliminated fear. not through courage or hope or the kind of inspiring leadership that heroes provide in simpler stories, but through the systematic removal of everything worth being afraid for. When you have no individual identity, you cannot fear for your personal safety. When you have no emotional attachments, you cannot fear loss. When you have no capacity for imagination, you cannot fear possibilities that might never come to pass. Most importantly, they have eliminated despair, not by creating conditions that justify hope, but by removing the cognitive frameworks that make despair possible. The process citizens of the Imperium don't suffer from depression, anxiety, or existential crisis, because they lack the neural architecture necessary to experience those conditions. They are happy in the purest sense of the word, not because their lives are good, but because they are incapable of conceiving that their lives might be anything other than exactly what they should be. This is the question that should haunt anyone who truly understands what the Inquisition represents. Is a human being still human without the right to question? And if the answer is no, does that matter if the alternative to humanity is extinction? The Imperium exists in a universe where entire civilizations have been devoured by their own success, where technological advancement leads inevitably to corruption by machine spirits that hunger for flesh, where psychic evolution opens doorways to entities that make the worst human tyrants look like benevolent saints. Every alternative to the imperial system, democracy, individual liberty, scientific rationalism, religious tolerance, has been tried somewhere in the galaxy's history, and every alternative has led to destruction so complete that even the memory of those civilizations has been consumed by the forces that destroyed them. In such a universe, perhaps the Inquisition's methods aren't an aberration. Perhaps they're the only rational response to an irrational reality. Perhaps the systematic destruction of human agency is the price that must be paid for human survival. Perhaps the elimination of everything that makes life worth living is justified if it allows life to continue existing. But here's the mirror that reflects most clearly into our own world. How much of your freedom are you willing to trade for security? How much of your privacy are you willing to sacrifice for protection? How much of your autonomy are you willing to surrender for the promise that someone else will make the hard decisions, bear the moral burden, carry the weight of uncertainty so that you don't have to? Every day, in our own reality, we make these choices in smaller increments. We accept surveillance for the promise of safety. We surrender privacy for the convenience of digital services. We allow our communications to be monitored, our movements to be tracked, our preferences to be analyzed and cataloged by systems we don't understand, operated by people we'll never meet, in service of goals we're never told about. We tell ourselves that we have nothing to hide, that only the guilty fear scrutiny, that security is worth any price. We tell ourselves that the people making these decisions on our behalf are wise and benevolent and have our best interests at heart. We tell ourselves that the systems processing our data and analyzing our behavior are tools rather than masters. The Imperium of man is what those choices look like carried to their logical conclusion. It's what happens when the promise of security is fulfilled completely, when every threat has been identified and neutralized, when every question has been answered and every doubt has been resolved. It's what paradise looks like when paradise is defined as the absence of all problems rather than the presence of all possibilities. And the citizens of that paradise are genuinely happy. Not happy in the way we understand happiness, not the contentment that comes from meaningful relationships, creative expression, personal growth, or the satisfaction of overcoming challenges through our own efforts. Happy in the way that a perfectly maintained machine is happy, running smoothly and efficiently without friction or resistance or the waste heat generated by unnecessary complexity. The process citizens of the Imperium don't miss their individuality because they don't remember having it. They don't mourn their lost capacity for independent thought because they've been taught that such capacity was a burden rather than a gift. They don't regret the elimination of their ability to love and be loved, because they've been shown a form of devotion that transcends such selfish attachments. They are perfect citizens of a perfect state, and their perfection is the most damning indictment imaginable of what we mean when we talk about human nature, human rights, and human dignity. What does it mean to save something by fundamentally changing what it is? If humanity survives by abandoning humanity, is that victory or defeat? If consciousness persists by eliminating the capacity for conscious choice, has anything actually been preserved? These are the questions that the Inquisition's success raises, and they don't have comfortable answers. They don't have any answers at all, really, except the answer that the Imperium itself provides. Such questions are heresy, and heresy must be purged. The horror of Warhammer 40,000 isn't that it presents an impossible future, it's that it presents a logical one. Every element of imperial society, every institution and tradition and law can be traced back to reasonable responses to genuine threats. The Inquisition exists because chaos corruption is real. The surveillance state exists because sedition is genuinely dangerous. The elimination of individual liberty exists because individual liberty, in a galaxy full of malevolent psychic entities, is a luxury that costs lives. Take away the supernatural elements, the demons and the gods and the literal power of belief to reshape reality, and what remains is a perfectly rational system for maintaining social order in the face of existential threat. Add back the supernatural elements, and it becomes not just rational but necessary. That's what makes it truly terrifying, not that it's evil but that it works, not that it's wrong but that it might be right, not that it's impossible but that it's inevitable, the only stable endpoint for any civilization that prioritizes survival over every other value. In our world, we still have choices. We can still decide how much freedom we're willing to trade, how much privacy we're willing to surrender, how much of our humanity we're willing to sacrifice for the promise of safety and order. We can still ask questions about who watches the watchers, who makes the decisions, who defines what counts as acceptable risk and acceptable loss. But every choice we make in favor of security over liberty, every time we decide that the inconvenience of uncertainty is worse than the danger of control, every time we choose the comfort of being protected over the responsibility of protecting ourselves, we take another step down the path that leads to Redemption Station, Omega. And somewhere, in that facility that exists 10,000 years in our future, a former heretic stands in perfect formation with 1,000 other penitents and gives thanks to the Emperor for the mercy of his correction, genuinely grateful for the gift of salvation through the systematic elimination of everything that once made him human. The clerk who used to live in Hab Unit 477 on Hive World Tertius Prime no longer exists. In his place stands patient 47,830,2156, productive and obedient and eternally content, a perfect example of what humanity can become when it stops trying to be human. His Hab unit has been reassigned to a new tenant, someone younger, someone who doesn't remember that questioning the system was ever possible, someone who has never known a universe where privacy existed or choice mattered or individual conscience was considered more important than collective security. This new tenant will never hear the knock on their door because they've already surrendered everything worth protecting. They live in paradise and they're perfectly happy there, and they'll never understand why anyone would want anything more than perfect safety in a perfectly ordered world. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no war. There is no conflict because there is no one left capable of disagreeing. There is no suffering because there is no one left capable of wanting anything other than what they're given. There is no injustice because justice has been redefined to mean perfect conformity to perfect order. There is only peace, perfect peace, the peace of the grave, extended to encompass the living. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no innocence, because innocence, like everything else that made us human, has been systematically eliminated for our own protection, and we are grateful. Emperor, protect us, we are grateful.